Thanks for joining us. We're going to get started here in just a second. We are live from Fox HQ here in Coldwater, Michigan. We are going to start a video here before we get started and let folks get in, but thank you so much for joining us.
He gets the one foot again.
A ton of folks pouring in. And again, thank you for joining us here live from the Fox HQ in Coldwater, Michigan. We've got a couple of great participants tonight here from Fox that are going to give you some expertise on all of this. And for everybody that's active in the chat, please keep that up tonight. We're going to be watching it all evening for your questions, your comments. So as you've got those pieces, please feel free to pour them in there and we will be watching for it. For everybody there, I am Nate Buelow, so I work for onX. I'm running our Elite program. So for those of you that are members, thank you so much for joining. And we've got some great reps from Fox. Justin, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I am Justin Mclean. I am the brand manager for the suspension brands that fall under Fox Factory. So that's going to be your BDS Suspension, JKS Manufacturing. Of course, we have Zone Offroad, and then Crawltech Revolution, which is our bumper and armor company.
Awesome. Yep. And Bryce joining us remotely, but do you want to do a quick intro?
Yeah. Hey there, everybody. I am the Offroad Aftermarket brand manager, and I am saying hello from San Diego.
Awesome. Well, thank you both for being here tonight and carving out a bunch of your time in your evening. You can see the chat is really going off with everybody.
It's blowing up. It's distracting me. I love it. It's awesome. Like, let's talk about shocks and suspension.
All right, cool. So for the participants that have dialed in, we're going to try something a little bit different this time. We've got a mobile iPad, and we're actually going to be walking you around a Jeep right behind us here and talking some of these pieces, as well as some great displays that the Fox BDS JKS team has gratefully surprised. So without further ado, let's jump in. I think the one question that we saw more than anything else from all of you that participated early and submitted your questions is, why lift modify your suspension? Like,
sure.
Why do it?
And, you know, for someone who works in suspension, it just seems automatic. Like nothing in my household isn't messed with in some way. Yeah. If it's a two-wheel drive, it's lowered. If it's four-wheel drive, it's lifted, you know, that type of thing. So, you know, for me, especially lifted suspension, you know, that goes to off-road capability. I need larger tires to get over the obstacles that I want to play on. The achieving of larger tires, you know, involves lifted suspension. One of the biggest things that I find, you know, we take the Jeep world, for example, people run 37s with no lift, stuff like that. I want to up travel. Okay. I don't want to get too down into the weeds and the technical side too soon here, but when you lift a vehicle, you gain up travel. You know, you take that 2 to 3 inches that maybe, you know, let's say 3 to 4 from the factory.
Yep.
You take that to 5 to 6 and you can do more spirited driving off road. Those are the things I enjoy doing. That's your fire roads and, you know, hitting a boulder, things like that. Bigger tires, more up travel, more wheel travel. All those things that kind of add to the adventure. I don't want to limit myself. You know?
I love that. I know that's why all my rigs are modified.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about the differentiation between some of the lifts and shocks that are out there. We're obviously here at Fox. I run on all my rigs. let's talk a little bit about the differences between them all.
So there's a few things we'll talk about. You know, we got a lift kit versus a suspension system.
Yep.
A lift kit, basically, we're going to make the vehicle taller and we're going to run bigger tires. Not necessarily a bad thing. We can still do some decent upgrades there as far as a shock upgrade, you know, things like that.
Totally.
But suspension system, now we're into replacing many of the components on the vehicle. You know, for a solid axle rig like a Jeep, we're going to replace springs. We're going to replace track bars. We're going to start integrating a whole system of performance onto the vehicle versus just making it taller.
All right, team, we're going to try a little camera switch here. Do we want to maybe walk over to the Jeep and point out some of that stuff for our folks?
Take a look at it.
All right.
Hold on. I got to do wardrobe change number 1 here. This is a JKS Jeep.
Let's do it.
Catch me with my shirt off.
I will not. I will not. You're out of view. And hey, for everybody in the chat that was commenting on the video, thank you. Do appreciate that. It helps us as we're looking to focus on it.
All right. So we'll see how many wardrobe changes we do tonight, right? Look at that. Same polo, different logo. Here we go.
All right. Yeah, we're in the big time there from that iPhone that commented. So let's get the camera on. All right, guys, let's see keep commenting away if you can or can't see it. But Justin, take it away from some of the pieces that you were talking
Hey,
through.
Nate,
So
pin the iPhone or pin the iPad to the main screen.
You got it.
All right. So here we are on a Jeep setup, but you know, this is going to fit for all of you Ram and Super Duty guys as well. Basically, and you know, even some of the older solid axle Toyotas, although we're not into coil, you know, suspension. But basically, if we're coil suspension with links, Jeeps kind of fit it. We have a Jeep because it fits the space really well. This one's been modified with a coilover conversion. We'll definitely get into that in the future. But when we're talking about replacing components and we're talking about increasing up travel, you know, we've got a little bit of a limited up travel here, just with the size of tires I currently have on it. But I can get anywhere of 6 inches of up travel on this vehicle, which is considerably more than it came with from the factory. All those things provide, you know, that off-road comfort, but also increased ride height, which is going to give you room for bigger tires. And now, you know, better shocks for bigger events. That's what we'll call, you know, off-road things. You know, hit a whoop or hit a rock or climb out. These are events. And we want space for more events. So, cool. You know, we've extended sway bar links here. You can see the control arms have been adjusted there. As we lift the vehicle, you know, as that suspension lifts, the wheelbase actually accidentally, or by math and science, it just gets shorter. Yep. That's why you end up with adjustable control arms or longer than stock control arms. We're gaining that wheelbase back, mainly in the rear. In the front, we're adjusting for caster. Caster is such an important thing. This is one rabbit hole of track bars and steering linkage and all that stuff. When we talk caster, what we're talking about is a relationship of this upper ball joint right here to this lower ball joint that's down here.
Right here.
We need the upper one to be behind the lower one. Okay.
We're doing a work event right now that I just want to check in on real quick. So
Okay.
we're doing like a live broadcast of some stuff that I had set up. I just
Carter, we can hear you.
Sorry, guys.
Did we get an added guest for a minute?
We did. Carter jumped in. So there we go.
Let's keep rolling. We had an added guest for a minute. But basically, we want that relationship of this upper ball joint to be behind, right? If we picture this as a line right here, we need this line to tilt that upper ball joint back. That stops that shopping cart effect. Everybody's been to the grocery store to grab a shopping cart, the wheels wobbling like crazy. Anybody who's owned a Jeep that hasn't experienced death wobble yet, A, that's not fair. You know, that's a rite of passage for owning a Jeep. B, so much of that driving experience comes from caster. I don't think we can highlight that enough. When you lift your vehicle, make sure you're doing some sort of caster correction on your solid axle vehicles, your Jeeps and you know, big truck. We need a caster correction there. We need a front end alignment. IFS a little different. If we want to spin the laptop around, we'll look at some IFS components here. So IFS, independent front suspension. We're talking Toyotas, half-ton Chevy, half-ton Fords, half-ton Dodge. You know, run the gamut. Again, we're highlighting big bad coilover conversion. version. Pretend this is a strut until we get to the shock part. Again, here we've done it at the knuckle. Okay, we want to lift this vehicle. We want to put a bigger, space between upper and lower control arm. We're going to do that with the knuckle. That's going to allow us to keep ball joint angles on par. Okay, these ball joint angles become super important in IFS. This ball joint has an operating range of motion, just like the lower ball joint does. We need it to be happy in there at the full range of travel, not just at ride height. Okay. So if we only focus on that at ride height, what did we do, when we put a longer shock or thing like that in there? So we're talking, this is really important, the longevity of these pieces. Knuckle upgrades, we're relocating things, we're moving steering up or down to make the rack and pinion happy. Sway bar link, mounts, things like that. All that stuff gets adjusted, just like it would on a solid axle vehicle. But here we go on the IFS. IFS caster is pretty much set. So what we're messing with here on IFS is camber in and out. Okay. That's one of those things that that's where your upper control arm comes in. You're going to see some changes here, some changes in these angles. I'll be honest with you, this is an engineer's suspension system. Sure. I'm a Jeep guy, solid axle, super simple. It's a very basic thing. We get into IFS, we start talking Ackerman angles and camber and gains and losses and different use cases and stuff like that. So this is where we really want to make sure when we're messing with IFS, we do not just bolt on lift kit. We want a suspension system. That's super important to kind of get down in the weeds on that stuff and get the good stuff.
Cool.
So yeah.
All right, team, we're going to switch back to the non-shaky cam.
The non-shaky cam. We're pretty deep into the weeds here, so we'll definitely get to questions in a little bit. Pretty excited about that.
Yeah, and it looks like there's a bunch of comments flowing in. So we will, hearing, we're going to work on that. We'll bring it a little closer. So hopefully, team, that helps a little bit on some of the basics of it and walking around some of the actual product and showcasing it through. And the one thing I was going to add is, for everybody that's here and dialed in, you can get that suspension system from our partners here at Fox, whether it be Fox Shocks, BDS Suspension, and JKS. All the things that we just talked about are available. So cool. Well, let's go through a few more of the other questions that we have come in early, and then we're going to start to get to this running list that's going on in the chat, which is awesome.
Excellent.
Okay, Bryce, I think this one's for you. What is the purpose of a shock, and why is it important to upgrade for off-road use?
That's a great question, Nate. So the reason to have a shock on your vehicle is to control movement. And I was driving up to LA yesterday and I saw this RV go across this bridge and it just did this crazy oscillating movement. And I was thinking, man, if I could have gotten this on video, it would have been perfect for this class today, because the vehicle had no shock damping. When it hit the bridge, it oscillated. So it just went bounce, 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 bounce all the way until it finally flattened out again. And so that vehicle needed shock damping. The simplest way of describing what a damper does is that we are controlling the shock fluid and allowing it to pass through the main piston to then control the movement of the vehicle. So the difference between your stock shocks on your vehicle and just an aluminum bodied 2.0 Fox shock, there's some big contrasts. The big ones is that the Fox shock, you're going to get in a internal floating piston, which separates the shock fluid from the nitrogen. In a stock shock, you're not going to get that. The nitrogen and the fluid is all hanging out together. So you start hot dogging it off road. You even are ripping around town and the fluid and the gas is mixing, which then results in cavitation. You're basically getting a cappuccino in your shock, and that's not what you want. You want to have those separated so then you don't experience that cavitation or shock fade. Another big upgrade versus a stock shock and an aftermarket shock is that we have a aluminum bodied shock. And so this is going to prevent corrosion, and the shocks are going to be looking good forever. And they're also 100% rebuildable.
Very cool. Bryce, while we're talking through that, do we want to maybe talk through some of the different options that Fox has available to it? And what we can do in our screen is we're going to pull them up. We've got some demo units here. But team, we're always looking for feedback, and you all are super active in this chat. So please keep it coming.
Yeah, I'm seeing some good stuff in the chat for sure. So Bryce, we got our 2.0. Can everybody see this here? Bryce, going to give me a thumbs up here?
We got it. Yep.
So Bryce, here's my question for you. When we say a Fox 2.0 performance series, what are we actually talking about here? 2.0. Talk me through that.
So we're talking about the diameter of the shock, Justin. And we make shocks here at Fox, everything from mild to wild. And when we're talking even motorsports, we make shocks that are 4 inches in diameter for trophy trucks. And those things can go through 4.5 foot deep whoops, like nothing.
All right, so excellent. So some of the features and benefits on this 2.0 performance series, this is kind of, where we might be comparing this guy to, the factory shock that came on your truck, maybe an OE style shock. So this gets that big benefit of that internal floating piston in here, separating the nitrogen charge from the fluid. So if we go up a little bit, I'll grab the next size up, right? And so now we're to a Performance Elite shock, and this is a 2.5 inch diameter. Bryce, what are some of the features of this guy when we think about this guy here? Is it all on the screen?
Yeah, no, you're looking great, Justin.
Excellent, excellent. So, we got some extra features on this guy. I got a reservoir here. We got some clickers going on. Everything just seems bigger. What are we working with here?
So this shock is kind of what I'd like to call the ultimate daily driver shock. And I saw that this was kind of coming up in the chat of what do I want to have on my vehicle if I'm daily driving, but I'm also getting after it in the dirt or going camping and whatnot. I would say that this is the shock for you. This is what I've got on my truck. This thing is awesome because the first big selling point is that you are moving the internal floating piston from the shock body to the reservoir. Now, what that does...
Not here, but here.
Yes, sir. So what that does for you is it removes dead space in the shock body. This allows the main piston to go even farther into the shock body.
So we've increased wheel travel for the same shock design.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Now, in addition to that, we also have a dual speed compression adjuster. So there's 2 ways to change the damping on your vehicle. One is going to be the main piston, which is not externally adjustable. The other way is the dual speed compression adjuster. So we can modify the way that the vehicle rides with that clicker, and we can change it for load, for the way that your personality is, like how hard you want to drive the vehicle, and then also the terrain.
Excellent, excellent. So we're getting some tunability in there. All right, I'm going to grab the last one. Got a bit of a monster truck on our hands here, folks. Bryce, what on earth is this?
So this is the 3.0. This is a factory race series.
On the screen.
The factory race series shock. So what really sets apart the performance from the factory race is that this shock has internal bypass. Now, if anybody's ever seen a external bypass shock on a race truck, that affords you different zones of damping control. So this shock does that, but in a smaller package. The great thing about this shock is that it allows you for multiple zones of control in a tight constraint like a factory vehicle. So say we're going through G-outs, we're jumping the vehicle, we're running the vehicle really hard. This shock allows you for the support that you're going to need to really push the vehicle to the next level.
Excellent.
Justin, let's take a step back real quick. I saw a question about high and low speed compression adjusters, and I think this is a good opportunity to kind of talk about that.
Absolutely.
So the high speed compression adjuster is the silver knob, the large knob, and high speed compression is going to be fast shock shaft movements. It doesn't actually mean that you're going fast, but it means that the shock is compressing fast. So an example of this is going to be G-outs, whoops, a square-edged hit. Maybe you're rock crawling in Moab and you're dropping down a ledge and you drop and the ledge falls away quickly. That is going to be a high-speed event. A low-speed event, which is the orange knob that Justin's pointing at, is going to be chassis movement. And the chassis movement is going to be the body floating. The best way to describe it is, say you're going on a road trip and you've got a rooftop tent on, you got a lot of load, and you go around a corner and the vehicle wants to kind of flop to the outside. Now, adding low speed compression is going to mitigate that. You're going to be more planted through the corner.
Excellent. Excellent stuff. That chat is full of so many good questions. You just want to get to them.
Well, yeah, and I think the last piece before we're going to get into all your questions, and hopefully, Bryce, thanks for calling the audible there and going to that, because I know it came up in the chat, and hopefully it answered that person's question. Let's talk the last thing that I know a lot of folks wrote into us about first is coilovers. Do we want to talk a little bit about, are they worth it? When do you upgrade to that? Like, it's just a big change from some of the stuff we just talked about.
So, and I just saw a question in the chat about that, and you know, I'll give my piece on it, and then let Bryce give his piece from the internal side of the coilover. So, one of the questions that gets asked a lot when we're talking about a coilover versus a traditional shock and coil spring, right? Oh, I get more flex because I have a coilover. Not really. A 12-inch travel shock is going to travel the same amount as a 12-inch travel coilover.
Yep.
So when we go to coilovers, we get infinite adjustability. And if we grab that remote thing here, we can talk about that infinite adjustability with a coilover.
All right, folks, so don't heckle us here. Give us just a second, and we're going to try this one more time.
Nate's been drinking Red Bull off camera, so hang on for the shaky ride. So
you are absolutely right.
None of that happened, but maybe a little.
All right, Bryce, how we doing?
We looking good, Bryce?
Can you pin it to the main screen?
This one should be.
Not yet.
Not yet. Try one more time.
I see a lot of Nate's fingers.
Well, sorry to all the participants. We appreciate you bearing with us.
He trimmed his nails, washed his hands. We're good to go.
How about now?
Looking good.
Killing it.
All right. So coilovers. This Jeep has been upgraded to a coilover conversion, and one of my favorite benefits of that is the infinite adjustability. So when we talk about that, I got two different coil springs in here. This is a true dual rate system, meaning I got a 200-pound spring on the bottom, I got a 300-pound spring on top. We do that a little bit differently. This is also an R&D test wheel. As you can see, this Jeep is not well manicured. This thing is beat on purpose to test all this stuff. So, that being the case, it may not look factory new, and that's fine with it. So basically what happens is when I have two springs pressing against each other, as they are right now, 200 and 300, our spring rate is 200 plus 300 is 500. Basically we're in the 115 to 120 range. I don't have the calculator in my head, but basically when you press two springs against each other, it's not the combined force, they're pressing against each other compressing. So we get a really low spring rate. For you JK owners, generic spring rate, 230, 240 in some cases. So to take a JK, put it on coilovers at 115, that really starts to feel good. That's something that Jeep really did with the JL. Factory spring rates dropped considerably. We got that good road feel. So there's that. So we were able to change spring rates. I can buy these springs, 40, 50 bucks a piece, try different springs, do all that, different length springs. Up here, preload. Preload is how I can literally adjust ride height on this Jeep. So this Jeep is set up at about 3 inches of lift right now. If I put a 1/2 inch of preload in here, I might get 3/4 of an inch ride height. If I take a 1/2 inch out, lose 3/4. So I can literally adjust the ride height of this Jeep. So now I've got a spring rate that's tunable and a ride height that's tunable. But wait, there's more. Okay, so now we have a crossover, and this guy is an unsung hero in so many dual rate coilover setups. So we were talking about how those springs pressed against each other, creating this soft ride height, right? As this shock shaft travels up, I've got this black crossover ring here, right? You see this guy, piece of Polana? That's gonna hit my crossover adjuster nut. So basically, in about 1.25 inches, I'm gonna go up and hit that and transition to a full 200-pound spring rate. So now I'm able to take a bigger event and I'm slowing down the momentum of the axle or tire as it's coming up, okay? This is where people are like, oh, I got coilovers, I can jump it now. Ish. Ish. We'll let Bryce talk about that and as we move on. But we can adjust this crossover. If I want to run this way up and stay on that 100-pound or so rate and keep the soft ride through the entire range of motion shock, I can do that. Or I can bring it down, and that way there I'm not blowing through the spring rate. Okay. When we go into that, now we got the remote reservoir with the DSC adjuster. Again, I've got the high and the low speed compression adjuster as well. So this thing is just ridiculously tunable compared to a shock and spring setup. You won't get more flex out of it given a length. You know, if you got 10-inch travel shocks, 10-inch travel coilovers, I'm gonna guess you're gonna net rate around 10 inches of travel out of your shock and coilover. Sure. You know, so on and so forth. Drawbacks to coilovers, packaging can be a thing. This is a bolt-on conversion we make here at JKS Manufacturing. We make one for JL and JK. But you will see a lot of vehicles, and I won't just say Jeeps, vehicles in general. Many companies make things. I'll give a little plug to my guys at Barnes 4-Wheel Drive. They're onX partners here. Yep. They make a lot of coilover mounts and things like that, so you can get custom with this. So packaging can be a little tricky, but there's a lot of support in the industry to help you out with that. You know, this allows the use of an air bump, kind of part and parcel. I saw a couple questions about air bumps in there. This kind of goes back to slowing down momentum. Okay. We've all hit a bump stop before, and it's that jarring, spill my coffee moment, right? Where when we hit a hydraulic bump, and again, Bryce is the expert here, but we're slowing the momentum down. And we're slowing it down instead of all at once, you know, kind of gradually. So that's my bit on coilovers. Bryce, shock expert, what did I miss?
You nailed it. You hit all the good parts. I guess another thing that we could re-emphasize here is zones of damping control. And so that's that adding a bump to your rig is adding another layer of damping control. So rather than blowing through your coilover or your shock, you have an extra little bit of control at the very end before you hit the frame. And so this comes into play and is very helpful when you decide to start going a little bit quicker through the bumps or trying to catch some air.
Yep. Excellent, excellent. You can see this Jeep is set up really for daily drive. We got this pressed up a little bit, but generally speaking, this Jeep has about 5 inches of up travel. And you know, again, you can dial all that in with your coilover. You can change your bump stop height. Want to talk about spring fatigue? You don't want to beat on coilover springs, over compress them, stack them, things like that. Spring fatigue is something that that doesn't get talked about enough, but it's the reason for a lot of the things to be the way they are. You know, as far as we got bump stop in here, probably to keep fender out of tire, but also we don't want to crunch springs down. They don't like that. Springs like to have a little bit of wiggle room on either side. We don't want to put them at what's called coil bind, or I call blocking them or stacking them. Sure. Springs do not enjoy that. Coil springs, dual rate coil springs for aftermarket stuff like that, they really don't enjoy it. Factory coil springs don't love it either. So a lot of things, you know, related to spring fatigue, you know, suspension manufacturers got to play that game, cool, you know, so to speak. Yeah. Yep. So there's coilovers. I got to stand up. My knees were getting sore earlier.
All right. So far with us, camera change, folks. Hopefully that was helpful. Couldn't see the chat through that time, but I'm guessing y'all had a ton of questions there. So Let's fire away. I'm gonna scroll back up to the top, unless Bryce or Justin, if you guys had any ones that you saw that jumped out that you kind of wanted to hit on.
I saw a whole bunch, and I'll stay here till 2 a.m. As long as people are wanting to see and answer their question, I'm totally fine with that. Yep.
All right, folks. Well, shameless plug. That is the dedication from the Fox team. That's the dedication that goes into all their products. And one thing I should highlight on here for all of you, if you're not elite members yet for onX, join up, because for this month and this month alone, you're saving 20% on all Fox, JKS, and BDS suspension components through their website. So you'll be able to hit me up afterwards, but if you need any help getting that done, but please sign up. And there's a ton of other partners that are in it. Just as Justin mentioned, Barnes is a big one, along with Method, one of your newest brands inside the family.
Yep,
so
absolutely.
All right, so let's start at the top here. Maybe too technical, but could you comment on the DCS upgrade to the 3-position compression selector on a OEM 2.5 podiums? How does the range of adjustment compare? So Mark, that was you. Is that one?
I'm going to go Bryce on that one. So we're talking podium series, Bryce. Is that
so we're talking side by side. So side by side. So the dual speed compression adjuster gives you roughly 750 pounds of damping control, which is pretty significant. And especially when it's broken down over about 10 to 12 clicks, motorsport or power sports versus off-road aftermarket is a little bit different, but it's still basically the same idea. Having that range of control versus a QS3 is a pretty significant upgrade. Even at loading a cooler onto the rear of your side-by-side is going to modify the load and the handling conditions of the vehicle, and adding just a little bit more compression is going to really determine whether or not you're going to be able to stay up on the whoops or get dragged into them and bottom out really hard.
So there you go, Mark. Not too technical for the experts that we've got tonight from Fox. Here's one from Mike, and I saw a few of these on rebuild, so maybe we can spend a little bit of time on that. Looking for information on rebuilding a Fox 2 with reservoirs, non-adjustable, 2 years old. Bryce, what do you think on that one? I know we've had a bunch of questions floating in on rebuilds.
Yeah, rebuilds are everything that we make is rebuildable. So if you want to, you could probably tackle it in your garage if you had have the tools and a can-do attitude. All we're looking at is shock oil, an O-ring kit, and a nitrogen charge. And that's, with the preface that your shaft isn't damaged or the bearing cap isn't damaged, but it's pretty simple and straightforward. If you don't want to handle it yourself, you can either send it to Fox and fill out the order form on our website, or you could find a local shop to handle it. But yeah, pretty low key, pretty easy to do.
Cool. All right, let's see. onX partnership discount, you can buy it directly from BDS or JKS. So for Doug, I see your question in there. Go to their websites, you can check it out, use the code, and they will ship direct to you, saving that 20%, which is huge. Yep. So upgrade now. Like, now's the time before we get into season. And
hold on, scroll back up.
What you got?
Holly Fowler says she's never had death wobble. Hold on. There we go. All right. So congratulations, Holly. and I don't have to give Holly a call out on Jeep Rite of Passage. We'll give her a shameless plug.
Yeah.
That's Mischief Maker there. And she's never had death wobble. All right. Like, I hope you never do, but also we should set up a rig with death wobble and make Holly drive it.
I think that'd be a good YouTube video. We should have that.
Yeah, I wonder if anybody has a YouTube channel that would be really cool on. So excellent to see Holly joining us tonight. So yeah, well, I want a suspension one. Find me one in there.
All right, let's see. Here we go. I have a Todd. This one's coming in from you. 15 JKU with a competitor's 2.5-inch suspension on 33s. It's my daily in an overlander rig, steel bumpers and kitchen. Use it for camping and exploring. I've had to replace my track bar, control arm bushings, ball joints. Given my use case, what solutions would Fox recommend for me to beef up my rig to have a good on-road driving and off-road performance?
Man, Shock Guy gets another one, but I'm going to steal this one.
Steal it.
2.5 Performance Elite with a DSC adjuster on there. We got some extra weight, steel bumpers. You got literally the kitchen sink in there. Obviously, that extra weight goes to the GVW of the vehicle. And, we start talking longevity of those components you've had to replace. The aftermarket's there for you, both in, suspension components, but also the shock. That 2.5 Performance Elite with the DSC adjuster will handle the extra weight, the bigger events, and really get you where you want to be on that deal.
Cool. All right. So here's one I think, Justin.
I love this one. I saw this one come in earlier.
Fire.
Jason McWilliams. All right. And so Jason, first off, I'm a fan of this modification, but I got to have just a certain thing done right for it. So
what modification are we talking about?
Yep. So the modification is using both adjustable control arms with control arm drop brackets to level up the suspension arm geometry. That's a fantastic question. So step one, control arm drop brackets get a really bad rap in the off-road community, okay?
Yeah.
And I always kind of crack up about that because I see them and then I look at every long arm on the planet hanging down 2 inches lower, right? So, they get a knock for hanging down. When I think about the control arm location in proximity to a gigantic 33, 35, or 37-inch tire, that control arm bracket from my testing has never been the issue. I didn't make it over something.
Okay.
Yep. So we've thrown them in boulder fields. I think Spring Creek Trail in Colorado has this boulder field in the middle of it where you're literally just driving through, beach ball sized boulders forever. And it just whoops everything, beats up the bottom of the Jeep, control arm drop brackets unscathed. They're too close to the tire in proximity in a lot of cases. But so what I want to do, we can, but we can't. So with a control arm drop bracket, just dropping the upper and the lower the same amount doesn't really excite me all that much. Because all we did is lower them down. And yes, we flattened out angles. So when we hit a bump, the tire does go up first instead of back and up, right? So when we got a steep control arm angle, we hit a bump, this arm wants to go back. We're going to feel that in the seat and then go up. Right. That's where we paid for all that suspension. We want it to go up first, right? So when we flatten out that angle, we hit a bump, it goes up first. So that's good. It's a benefit. But what I like to play with is the control arm separation variance at the frame side.
Okay.
So if we lower the lower or tighten up the upper, basically if we tighten up the triangle.
Okay.
So control arms, if we picture them side by side, so we got an upper and a lower.
Well, let's bring you in.
We're bringing me in. All right. So we got lower control arm here is flesh colored, but it's a JKS J-Link, I promise. So, okay. Control arms are here. They're never really parallel. Okay. And we don't want them parallel because you get anti-dive and anti-squat front and rear, right? So when we drop the upper and we create a tighter V here, we now just change the anti-dive characteristics on the front of a Jeep. Okay. So when you put on a set of correct control arm drop brackets, like the JKS ones, where we change that relationship and you're lifted 2.5, 3.5 inches and you stomp the brakes at a stoplight, most people are going to nosedive in the front of that Jeep, right? This is going to resist that. Okay. This is going to resist that because you've changed that geometry. So the only thing I will say is your adjustable arm is likely going to be put at factory length with the control arm drop bracket at about a 2.5 to 3.5 inch lift height. Because it does change the relationship between the mount location on the axle and the mount location on the frame. So because they're closer together, it don't need a longer control arm so much. You can still fine tune caster and do all the great things, but this is not a bad modification at all. I don't mind it a bit. We can go on for hours about the benefits. And I can call you out on the one negative somebody would call out pretty quick because I've driven a Jeep through Spring Creek Trail on 35s for control arm drop brackets, and that was not my issue. I had issues, but that was not it.
Well, hopefully, who was that?
Jason McWilliams. Yep.
Jason, if you don't think that was a good answer, I don't know what is, man. That was the best explanation I've ever heard of it. So, and the cool thing is that Fox, JKS, and BDS have solutions for all those pieces, right? So when you're thinking about doing those modifications, stop here first. There's a reason why they're elite partners, is because they're the best. All right, let's keep rolling through some of these questions. Let's see. That doesn't help. All right. Bryce, do you see anything that jumps out at you?
I see a ride height question from Neil about a side by side. So we're talking about ground clearance. So ultimately, with a side by side that comes equipped with Fox shocks from the factory, the first thing that you want to do out of the box is look at our website and look for a setup sheet. The setup sheets are going to show you where to measure from and how many inches from the ground to the skid plates you should be at. And then from there, once you've adjusted, you can determine whether or not you might need a spring upgrade kit.
Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent. Excellent. I saw a new Jeeper up here. Can we scroll up one?
Yeah. What do you got?
All right. Okay. Juliana?
Yeah, Juliana. Sorry if we butchered it.
Apologize, but super excited to have you here as a new Jeeper. Okay. We got an 80th anniversary Sahara two-door. Boy, isn't it nice, these new JLs? They're just amazing.
They're pretty incredible.
Your first Jeep, and you got something with an 8-speed and all the goodies. So you're going wheeling once a month. I'm jealous. I don't even think I'm wheeling once a month at this point. So I'm super jealous. So we need more ground clearance for more complex trail, but you still want to drive the Jeep every day, right? So my suggestion, let's look at tire size. Generally speaking, on a JL, I'm going to go right to a 35-inch tire. Depending on what you want to do, I'm going to say a 2.5-inch lift is going to achieve your goals. It's going to allow clearance for the 35-inch tire. It's going to grow that wheel travel, which is something we wanted to do. We kind of talked about why we'd lift something at the beginning. I'm going to pitch you on the JKS, of course, not just because I work here, but because of some of the features of the system.
Yep.
So I want you to check out the JKS J Connect lift. Going to be in that 2 to 3 inch range for the JL. This is the lift that I most often run on my personal vehicles. What I like about it. So adjustable track bar. Again, we're going to center that axle side to side with an adjustable track bar. That comes standard with the kit. Sway bar quicker disconnects. Again, we got the Sahara model. When we're off-roading, if we're going to pay for suspension, let's use it all. Let's get that sway bar disconnected. JKS, we're the industry standard for sway bar quicker disconnects. We invented the things back in 1989. They come with our kit, of course, So there's two things right there. Now we're into dual rate coil springs. Okay, so for a 2.5 or 3 inch lift, we could set a standard rate coil spring and a dual rate coil spring side by side. Okay. Dual rate's longer.
Yep.
Gives the same lift height. It's longer.
Sure.
It's got stored energy. You're going to see, we're going to talk about dual rate coil springs in a second.
Cool.
I got a visual for that. But basically, I can run a longer shock on a dual rate coil spring. So a dual rate coil spring with a longer shock is going to get more wheel travel than a linear coil spring or a standard coil spring, because basically if you droop the thing out too far, the spring comes unseated.
Yep.
Right? We got to have the spring in there. So dual rate coil spring all the way around in the JKS system. That J Connect kit that I'm talking about, that's going to come with a fixed link control arm to correct caster, correct wheelbase like we've been talking about, but it runs OE rubber bushings. So when we talk about, bushings and original equipment rubber bushings, that's a maintenance-free, perfect riding bushing designed for the Jeep.
Yep.
So that daily drive, that daily commute, you're never going to notice any negatives or side effects to the bushings and the control arms we just replaced. So now you're going to get more wheel travel. We got dual rate coil springs, and I got shock options like nobody's business. Believe it or not, we make kits with Fox shocks. So we can get you set up with a 2.0. If we're just getting started out, you can jump right into the 2.5 and have some adjustability. Maybe a little while down the road, you decide I want to go really fast down the trails. We can get you a 3.0. But all of those kind of go into what I would build as the perfect Jeep. I say this because there's a 2-door JL sitting in my driveway on this very lift kit.
There you go.
We do some wheeling with it. Obviously, wife daily drives it. So that's where I would be with that. You're getting 20% off right now, so you kind of get a good deal. So that's where I would be if I was a new Jeeper, and that's what I was looking for sure.
So Juliana, thank you. My X-ray, still daily, 31 2-inch lift. Awesome. Oh, that's Chris. Do we want to talk dual springs?
Yeah,
Dual
let's
rate
talk about a
springs?
dual rate spring. We just mentioned it a second ago. And so I got a Toyota Tundra dual rate spring. And I thought this was perfect because the thing's gigantic in diameter, right? And that's not some upgrade we made. The diameter, doesn't make it better or worse. But it really highlights the dual rate spring of it all. And so we'll take a look at it.
All right, folks, camera change again. So bear with, okay?
Oh man, is it time for a wardrobe change? We're talking BDS parts. I better do it.
Uh-oh, here we go. You guys get it special.
Wardrobe change. Back to the BDS shirt.
All right, we're gonna walk over. So Bryce, hopefully you're seeing it. I'll move my fingers around.
Okay, so dual right coil spring right here. Got the right shirt on. There we go. So what makes this wardrobe change? How do you do it anymore? I'm never gonna do it.
That's why we work on suspension.
That's right. Yeah, that's why we're here. So dual right coil spring. This is the telltale sign. You see how he's having stack rate up here? And we're extended here, just the space here, okay? This is how you can tell we're working with dual rate coil spring. When you install this in a vehicle, a lot of times you'll see the stack rate get even tighter. Okay. That's storing energy. That is just stored energy. This is gonna be a lower spring rate. I can actually move this with my hand versus this really stiff stuff.
Yep.
So this spring for a given lift height is longer than a standard linear rate coil spring, where all of these are equal spaced. Okay. We got actually two different rates, as we just showed. One is stiff, one is soft. We store energy, we allow additional wheel travel. When you think about, I am sure that we have people from the Midwest on this chat right now, and you've experienced potholes, okay? One or two potholes, especially this time of year, type of thing. When you hit a pothole, your tire doesn't go up first, it goes down, right? When we have a dual rate spring in effect, that stored energy gets that down there quicker. It lets the rebound in the shock, the rebound control, the tune of the shock. Bryce would probably just roll over rates, But we put all this time and energy in tuning these shocks. Now we have a spring designed for it and lets that rebound control get to work. Okay, so that in that millisecond of the tire dropping out, rebound takes over, spring has stored energy. Now we're ready for the upward movement versus just thudding in there with a standard old spring that was designed in the 40s.
Sure.
Yep. So that's dual rate spring. On a coil spring, we talk dual rate on coil over.
Yep.
Happy to answer that, of course.
Cool. Bryce, do you want to talk a little bit about how that plays into the shocks and how you're pairing it with a shock on that one too?
Are we talking about dual rate still?
Yeah.
I'm going to dish that one back to Justin. Most of the coilovers that I see over here in off-road aftermarket are generally either progressive or single rate.
Yeah. So when we play dual rate on a coil spring and dual rate on a coilover, the coilover is infinitely tunable. Like we said, we can swap out the two springs.
Yep.
We can change the position of that crossover and that slider. We have ride height adjustments, things like that. When we're into the shock itself, okay, because the initial movement is softer, we might lighten up the dampening load a little bit versus a traditional spring. So that traditional spring might be a 200 spring rate. My dual rate might be, a 125.
Okay.
So, we can talk things like, again, dampening, that initial movement of the shock. We can play with some of the gas pressures in there as well. When you think about some pressures that shocks come with, I can quote some numbers here, 90 to 100 PSI in some and upwards of 200 PSI in others, right? Cool. So we start talking shock pressures that are equal to or even higher than the spring rates. Obviously those pressures are in there for reasons, anti-cavitation, dampening control.
Sure.
But when you're playing with a dual rate spring, you might modify some of that. A good shock tuner might modify some of that to take advantage of that early initial movement.
Cool.
Yep.
And actually, what did I just see? While we're talking a little bit of that shock piece, explaining the difference between high speed and low speed adjusters. We touched on it a little bit, but do we want to talk a little bit about that for a sec?
I think we could get into it. I think Bryce could get into it if he wanted to.
Yeah, I think we covered it pretty decent earlier.
Okay. Maybe Ricky, if we didn't get it, comment again.
Biggest thing I always think of there, and not to piggyback on what Bryce says too much, but when we say high speed and low speed, That is shock shaft speed, not the speed of the vehicle. So you can be going really, really slow, but creating really high shock shaft speeds,
Okay.
you know, and conversely, you know, so think shock shaft speed when you're thinking high and low speed. Yep.
All right, let's see what else we got here. Lido, we talked a little bit about the JLP, so Lido,
Oh,
hopefully
I got a kit for that.
fire away. Here, let's run it out to everybody. Lido, I lost you in here.
Lido, there
we go. New Jeeper.
Yep. So you want to stay with that tire size. So we don't want a big lift, right? It's going to look like we skipped leg day. We developed a dual rate coil spring for a mild 1.5-inch lift, and we have a shock package for it and everything over at jksmanufacturing.com. Check that out. You're exactly who we had in mind when we did that. We wanted to get all the performance benefits of the dual rate coil spring, but usable on a 33 to a 35-inch tire without looking weird, right?
Sure.
So check that out. Search by 1.5-inch lift height for a JL. Absolutely. That's perfect for that.
Cool. Let's see what else we got. How does gross vehicle weight factor in? Is it to the smallest? Is it a little Samurai good to fit? Is the adjustability the answer for dialing in the variable loads?
So when you get into gross vehicle weight, this is something that's near and dear to my heart. Like, let's say you did have a Suzuki Samurai and you came over to the Fox website or the JKS site or the BDS site and you said, oh, that shock will work, I'm gonna buy it. You don't know that the tune in that shock isn't set up for a 1-ton truck.
Yep.
Right. So it's really important when we're talking gross vehicle weight to pair the shock with the vehicle. So if you have something, you know, if you've custom built a trail toy or crawler or something like that in your garage, let's get some corner weights, let's get some vehicle weight and speak with an expert, you know, to get this thing dialed in. Don't just grab a shock because it bolts into place, because you can put on the best Fox shock we make, and if it's tuned for the wrong vehicle, it is going to ride horrible, and vice versa, you know, type of thing. So when we talk gross vehicle weight, we're not increasing gross vehicle weight, by the way, with any of our lift kits or shock tunes or anything like that. You know, that's a safety concern and things that people should take into their own hands. What we're doing is playing within those ranges, but when we're building custom or we're grabbing custom, make sure we dial in a shock per the vehicle, not just because it fits. I can bolt a lot of shocks onto a Jeep that are made for a 1-ton truck.
Sure.
And they're not gonna ride good.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And the nice thing is that you all have the experts on staff that can help with some of that stuff, right?
Absolutely.
So I know we're going to get into some of the use cases because folks are posting some really specific questions, which is awesome. But in case we don't get to them, we've got experts on hand here at Fox, JKS, and BDS that can help you with your setup. So
Yep.
Something else I'd like to touch on for towing is that if you are looking to regain your level ride height and you think that your shock is supposed to maintain that ride height, you're wrong. If your vehicle, the ride height is dictated by the shock, something's wrong. Something's definitely wrong. We are going to change the ride height with the springs. So say you're towing and you want to get that level look back, you're going to need an add-a-leaf or a sumo spring or say an airbag. Depending on the application and how often you're towing, you're going to have to make that selection for yourself.
Absolutely.
Another thing, I just saw another one in the chat saying long travel and towing. Big question mark. I would say that the best thing to consider is that you're gonna make a compromise on either opposite of the spectrum. Those are on totally other sides of the spectrum. So making sure that you please the side that is used most would probably work best for you. So whether you're jumping the truck the most, maybe you want to go long travel. If you're towing every day for work, you probably don't want to long travel because you're going to make compromises.
Absolutely. What do we got here? We have Fox coilovers on a YJ.
Do we want to talk through this
one?
We
could talk a little bit about this. So I built a TJ. I built a number of kind of homebrew coilover conversions. 2.0 coilovers on the front of my YJ, 225 over 250. Does that seem too stiff? No, I don't. So believe it or not, so we're 200 over 300 on this JK. That's a 3.8 liter with a supercharger. She's a pretty heavy motor. You'd be surprised at how much that 4 liter weighs in the front of that YJ. They are not light.
Yep.
That's a big, long cast iron block. If you're happy with the ride height, you're happy with the performance, I don't see anything in those numbers that's alarming at all. You know, do you have an excessive amount of preload, anything like that? You know, those would be reasons to take a look at that. But if it's performing well through its range of motion, you're happy with its ride quality, there's nothing in those two numbers that alarms me one bit.
Cool. And Gary, that was your question in there, so hopefully that one helps you. Here's an easy one for the team. Is there a factory store in the Coldwater, Michigan?
There is not.
Okay.
So unfortunately, we're manufacturers, and so we don't have a nice consumer place to come in and pick up or anything like that. Your best bet is to look on our dealer locators. They're on all of our sites.
Yep.
You can find a dealer. There's a couple dealers close. There's one right down in Angola. And there is a dealer here in Coldwater as well that they can service you. So check out those dealer locators. They can get you taken care of. Sometimes when you walk in there, they can have a kit within a couple of hours because they'll just bebop over here and do the business to business thing. But that's not something we advertise. That's all luck right there. Yep.
Cool.
Yeah.
So, all right, for everybody here, we're running low on time, so we're going to get a couple more in, and then I promise we've got a record of them all, so we'll try and get back to you. And for the folks giving feedback, sincerely appreciate it. Nothing better than your insights as you're attending these, so thanks for carving out your night. We haven't talked about limit straps. Do we want to touch on that a little bit?
Sure. Shocks make really bad bump stops and really bad limit straps.
Yeah.
Shocks make really good shocks. That's what they're good at doing, right? But you always want to have a bump stop engaged before a shock goes fully compressed, and you always want to have a limit strap in place before a shock has to go fully extended. A lot of OE vehicles and OE setups don't have that, you know, your factory OE Jeep stuff like that. But if you're going coilover, especially if you're thinking about catching a little air time, you think about how fast that shock shaft accelerates out, that's not what that shock's, it'll do it, but it's not going to be happy about it. Definitely get a limit strap in there. I try to run a limit strap 1 inch to a 1/2 inch shorter than the shock.
Okay.
And also know when I first set them up, 2 inches shorter, they stretch.
Yep.
Anybody who's ever bought ratchet straps for their trailer and tied down their vehicle and went 10 miles down the road and tightened them up, and they stretch, and it takes a minute to break them in. Limit straps are no different. Absolutely great question. Great thing to have on the rig.
Cool. All right. Let's see. We haven't talked Bronco yet. Here's one, a 2.5 inch kit for the Ford Bronco without adjusters.
Without adjusters. I haven't seen one yet.
Watch this space.
Watch this space.
Yes.
So there's a lot going on with Bronco coilovers. I've actually seen a couple of questions in here. There's a lot going on. We're really excited about it. I know Bryce and his team at Fox are really excited about it. We're doing some amazing things with spring fatigue and making sure that we're taking care of that Bronco for today, tomorrow, and 5 years in the future. There are things happening. Things are kicking loose. We are really, really excited. We appreciate the patience. There's good stuff coming.
Cool.
So we're Heinz ketchup on coilovers for Broncos. It's coming.
So for all you Ford fans out there, get excited. There's going to be some cool things coming into the marketplace. All right, last one here. So let's scroll and find a good one. Bryce, have you seen one come through?
Let me look.
Let's see what we got. All right, here's a 392 one. So talking control arm drop brackets again on their 392, running 37s and a 3.5 inch lift. The control arm brackets.
Oh, we lost it.
And it jumped.
I love how many comments we're getting that it jumps so fast, right?
So the control arm brackets transform the ride and handling of my Jeep. It is fantastic. Yes, I hit the bracket on the rocks from time to time, but it just slides over, no big deal. So there's a little endorsement. Sorry, I thought there was a question in there, John, but hey, thanks for the comment about it. Let's see. Let's see, if you already have a 2.5-inch lift but want 37s, do you need a 3.5-inch lift or just beef up the suspension? Andrew, we need a little bit more on your vehicle there because that would help us a little bit. Let's see.
I can answer Andre's question. He's got a JL with a 2.5-inch lift. 35s, the good stuff. He's on KMC wheels. So again, just rounding off the conversation that we previously had about shocks and the product series that Fox offers. We have performance, elite, and factory race. For your vehicle, we have an offering in each of those product series. This is great because you can choose if you want to go mild to wild. Now, if you're daily driving your vehicle, and that's kind of my assumption, I'm probably going to steer you towards the Performance Elite series. It's going to allow you to crush those weekend trips, but then also go get the groceries on Monday.
Cool.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Man, who just offered to be our Bronco torture tester? Zachary, that line is so long. And it starts here, man. We get to play with the toys first, but we appreciate that. We try to torture test this stuff, as you can see with this R&D rig behind us, best we can before you guys get your hands on it.
So, folks, that's it. Two things I want to close on, and one, I want to give our very gracious participants from the Fox team, Fox, JKS, and BDS team, I should say, a big thank you for all their time, because I learned a ton just being here. Hopefully everybody in attendance did as well. So thank all of you for coming in to join us for tonight's webinar. A couple of things. One, hear all your feedback on the sound and the video and all that stuff. We're going to keep getting better. So yeah, thank you for that feedback, and we want to see it in the surveys. The last thing I would leave y'all with is we are going to be doing an exclusive Fox giveaway. We're working on putting the pack together for you. So one of you is going to get drawn for being here live and winning that Fox piece. So thank you. That's a big reward and a very generous donation from our friends here at Fox to hook us up with that. But Justin, Bryce, anything else you want to close?
No, I thought we were shaking hands, but we already met. But no, just really, I wanted to, thank everybody for taking some time out of their night and spending time with us. I won't speak for Bryce, but I truly enjoy sharing what the engineers and the techs and just my experience has taught me over the years working here. I enjoy that. If you're at an event and you see a booth for Fox or JKS or BDS, we don't staff those booths with people who aren't having fun. Stop in, say hi. We can do live Q&A right there as well. So just thanks for spending some time with us on your Tuesday night. And Bryce, your thoughts?
Thanks again for joining us. This was super fun, and I'm excited for the next one.
Cool. Absolutely.
All right, guys. Well, thank you all for being onX customers. Thanks for joining this webinar, and look for more of these in the future with some new and improved video and AV quality for all of you folks that had comments on it. So thanks again. We'll talk soon. Have a good night.